Hi, and welcome to Crazy Rich, the podcast where Sabrina and I take you on a wild ride uncovering fascinating companies, visionary founders, or just crazy good ideas we've discovered or been intrigued about. But here's the twist: we're not just telling business stories, we're filtering them through the cultural lens of a multiracial couple who has lived and worked all over the world. That means you'll get insights you won't hear anywhere else. Because how you experience a brand, connect with a founder, or discover companies just isn't the same in New York versus Hong Kong, Munich, or Sydney. I'm Andrew, an Asian who has lived a third of my life in Europe, a third of my life in Asia, Australia, and a third of my life in America.
And I'm a German from Munich who has now lived around the world in Asia, New York City, and now Sydney, Australia.
From a business perspective, I've worked in senior positions at billion-dollar hedge funds in New York City and London, and was a founding member of a private equity fund in Asia. Given my investor and entrepreneurial DNA, I can't help myself but review these stories with this "how does this business really work" filter.
As for me, I'm a social media, design, and marketing diva, if I say so myself. So I'll explore these stories with this filter and how it inspires me. Given I'm German and Andrew is Asian, we initially explore stories from Europe or Asia. But over time, American and other companies
Join us on our global adventure of an ordinary couple discovering extraordinary companies, founders, and ideas to inspire your day.
For our second episode, we thought we'd do a deep dive into something from my cultural heritage, something that had its origins in Asia, but that everyone could relate to today.
What if I told you that the most powerful thing to transcend nations isn't gold or oil or even TikTok? It's a humble bowl of noodles.
Yeah, that's right. Not just any noodles, we're talking about noodles that have crossed borders, shaped economies, survived wars, and even hitched a ride to space. But first, let's go way, way back in time to discover the origins of the humble noodle. Noodles trace their roots back over 4,000 years ago to ancient China. In 2005, archaeologists discovered a bowl of thin, delicate yellow noodles at the Lajia archaeological site in northwestern China. These noodles measured over 50 centimeters, which is pretty long, like half a meter in length, and about zero point 0.3 centimeters in diameter, made from millet, a staple grain of the time. This discovery significantly extended the known history of noodles, highlighting their early presence in Chinese cuisine.
Yeah, sorry to break it to you Italians. You weren't the first ones. From China, noodles spread across Asia, adapting to local tastes and ingredients. By the 9th century, Japan had embraced wheat noodles, known as udon, that thick, chewy noodle that our kids love. And by the 14th century, Korea had its own variations.
The modern innovation, however, that we would like to unravel for you listeners today is the instant noodle.
Yeah, you just pour hot water over your noodles, wait a few minutes, add your flavoring, ideally lots of MSG in there,
That's right.
and voila, you have it. Whether you're living in America, Europe, or anywhere in the world, or even, as we will discover later, even in space, we've all eaten instant noodles.
That's right. The instant noodle market is actually a pretty significant segment of the global food industry. So here's a snapshot. 2024, the global noodle industry was valued at about $60 billion and is projected to reach about $100 billion by 2032. So that's a CAGR of 6% over 8 years. Pretty good for a food product. Noodles are served over 120 billion times annually, and that equates to 3,800 servings of noodle per second.
Wow.
That's a lot of noodles.
That's a lot of noodles.
Who are the top consumers in the world? As you'd expect, it comes out of Asia, China, Indonesia, India, kind of the most populous nations in Asia, and then rich countries like the USA, actually.
What happened to the Europeans? They haven't developed a taste for it yet.
Yeah, I think they're all kind of wound up in pasta because the Italians did such a good job at it. And there's also been a lot more Asian immigration into the US.
Yeah,
so
that's
Asian
right.
immigrants have probably brought noodles with them, right? So hence more noodles are being consumed in the US. And instant noodles have become pretty much a daily staple, for sure for the Asian immigrant population in the US, but also for lots of other everyday Americans. The US actually consumes 5.1 billion servings of noodles annually, and that's roughly equates to 160 servings of noodles per second. That's a lot of noodles being eaten by the average American.
So instant noodles is actually the comfort food of the millennial generation, especially in Asia.
Absolutely.
And I'm a millennial, I totally get it.
So I remember being in boarding school in Ireland, and my comfort food hidden away in my locker were instant noodles, either in a cup or in a packet. On the days which are cold and rainy in Dublin, as you can imagine, Irish weather isn't fantastic, and boarding school food isn't great. There I was sneaking away to make my own instant noodles.
Well, that could have been a new currency.
That's right. Actually, it was currency amongst the few Asians that were in this Irish boarding school, actually.
You didn't manage to get the Irish people into it?
No, they weren't really into it. They're kind of more into their fish and chips. Although we introduced this Iranian guy who was there for like only a year, Iranian student, and he liked it. So, yeah.
At least you got one person hooked.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Exactly.
So join us today on our deep dive adventure into 3 of the most beloved instant noodle brands of millennials, or the instant noodle generation. Let's unravel what we can learn from their founders, noodle innovation, and ideas to make money.
Exactly. So we researched many instant noodle brands and decided to select just 3 brands to capture 1, the origins of the noodle, 2, the modern innovation to make it instant, and 3, what happens when instant noodles converges with tech. So for our first noodle brand, we selected Nissin Cup Noodles. Our journey begins with Momofuku Ando, the founder of Nissin Foods and the inventor of instant noodles. It's a super interesting story where noodles meet history, innovation, and even outer space.
So Ando-san actually not just invented instant noodles, but cup noodles. The product is so iconic. It's not just a snack. It's a cultural phenomenon. Who doesn't love cup noodles? Our kids remember it so well flying Cathay Pacific from Hong Kong to New York City. Cathay offers simple cup noodles as a snack.
They're probably the only airline that does that, actually.
I think so.
Yeah.
Certainly I've never seen it anywhere else. So since they were 5 years old, they remember the waft of steaming hot cup noodles noodling its way through the cabin. So much that nowadays, our 10 and 13-year-old, they always remember to ask for cup noodles when they fly Cathay Pacific.
For these long-haul flights, it just smells so good down the aisle. So let's rewind and go back to how this all began. Ando-san was born in Taiwan in 1910. His parents were ethnically Chinese from the Hokkien, Fujian ethnic group. But he moved to Japan as a young man. And despite being Chinese, he spent most of his life in Japan and made most of his significant contributions there.
In fact, there are other iconic Japanese entrepreneurs who are not ethnically Japanese, but made themselves in Japan. One that comes to mind immediately is Masayoshi-san, the famous founder of SoftBank, who's actually ethnically Korean.
Yeah, that's right. So back to Ando-san's story. And it all starts in post-World War II Japan, where food scarcity was a real problem. Japan was dealing with a ton of challenges, food shortages, economic struggles. This led Ando to focus on creating a low-cost, easily accessible meal for everyone.
He founded Nissin Foods, a direct result of Ando's determination to solve hunger issues following World War II. He famously said, "Peace will come when the world is well fed." Amen to that.
That's right. So Nissan Foods was founded in 1948 in Osaka, Japan. But it was actually only a decade later that Ando-san invented instant noodles. So the legend goes that in 1958, he invented the world's first instant noodles, chicken ramen. Ando's road to inventing instant noodles was actually faced with many failures and setbacks, but he worked tirelessly, experimenting with different ways to preserve noodles and make them instantly edible. Why was it so hard to make instant noodles? Well, the first challenge was, how do you make noodles last? Right? Because remember, initially, noodles are fresh, and you wanted to make it instant and basically could have a long shelf life.
Correct, and don't need to be refrigerated. I think that's probably also a challenge.
Yeah, that's right.
So, which at that time was a huge challenge. Fresh noodles, they spoil fast.
That's right.
Dried noodles, they take forever to cook.
That's the dilemma.
Yeah. Ando needed something that combined convenience with a long shelf life. So Ando's eureka moment came after watching his wife fry tempura. He was sitting there admiring the way the batter sizzled when it hit him. Yeah, he noticed how the batter puffed up and absorbed oil, but when it cooled, it dried out completely. And he thought, what if I fry noodles the same way?
Boom! Flash frying noodles was born. By deep frying the noodles, he removed all the moisture, preserving them for months. Plus, the frying process created tiny, tiny pores in the noodles, which made them rehydrate super fast when you added water.
Right, because what does it usually take for a cup noodle? 2 minutes?
2 minutes, yeah, tops. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah. So the second challenge was getting the texture right. So now, just because Andrew figured out how to preserve the noodles didn't mean they actually tasted good. His first batches are total disaster.
Some were too mushy, some were rock hard, some turned into a weird pasty sludge when you added water. I think experiment is the right word. And you think about this was a pretty long time ago, right? 1948. And he was really coming across a lot of these hurdles.
Right. I mean, imagine gross, like all that slushy and mushy noodles.
That's right.
And also people were used to fresh ramen, so you had to compete with people being used to the taste of fresh ramen.
Yeah, and fresh ramen in Japan is like really delicate.
Yeah, it's a
perfect, right?
Perfect balance of chewiness and elasticity.
That's right.
So if Ando's noodles didn't taste just as good, no one was gonna buy them.
Exactly. So he tested different wheat flours, adjusted the kneading process, played around with cooking times. We basically turned into like a mad scientist in a shed, tweaking every little thing until he got that perfect texture.
And then challenge number 3, how to make the noodles taste good. The flavor problem. At first, the noodle tasted like nothing, probably like cardboard, just plain wheat and oil.
Well, not exactly the mouth-watering instant noodles that we know today. But he figured that you could add seasonings before drying the noodles, locking in the flavor.
And that's how, drumroll, chicken ramen was born, the world's first flavored instant noodle.
Pretty cool, right? If you think of all the challenges he had to face. How do you make noodles last? How do you get the texture right so it's not just sludge? And then how do you actually make it taste good?
Yeah, never really thought about it. But...
Absolutely. Fun fact, Ando's first customers were actually housewives. He specifically marketed instant noodles as a way to make quick, tasty meals without the hassle of cooking from scratch. So he had a pretty tough sort of like test group, essentially, right?
Right.
For all the 3 things that we described before, whether it be taste, texture, and shelf life.
Yeah, I'm surprised he went after the housewives, because they're probably the toughest judges out there.
Well, I think that's why you chose them, because they were the toughest judges out there. And if you could satisfy the housewives, you got a winning product.
That's true.
That's right. Ooh, that's a challenge number 4. Okay, so the final challenge was making it affordable. So here's something surprising. When Ando first launched chicken ramen in 1958, it wasn't cheap. In fact, it was a luxury product. Wow, how crazy is that? You think of it as like literally cheap comfort food today, but it was a luxury product when it was first launched. One pack cost, how much does it cost?
35 yen, which was way more expensive than a bowl of fresh ramen at a noodle shop.
Wow, so you had to compete against fresh ramen on a price basis. That's interesting.
That's right.
That sounds crazy. I guess back then the production process was still small scale. So then the costs were pretty high.
Absolutely. And at first, people didn't totally get why they should pay extra for something they could make from scratch. It's like if someone tried to sell you pre-made rice, but charged more than a regular bag of rice. You'd be like, why?
Exactly. But Ando knew that once people tried instant noodles, they would just love the convenience. So all he needed to do was get the cost down.
So he did what all great inventors do. He scaled up. He streamlined productions, automated the frying process, and found ways to make the ingredients cheaper without sacrificing quality.
And once sales started picking up, economies of scale kicked in. The more he made, the cheaper each pack became.
And that's how instant noodles went from a fancy novelty to a household staple. I mean, fast forward to today, you can get a pack for like what, 50 cents?
50 cents, yeah, 25 to 50 cents, in retail. Or even less if you buy in bulk. College students, late night workers, broke backpackers, or Asian students in an Irish boarding school like me many, many years ago, we all owe Momofuku Ando a huge thank you.
So here's a plug for all of us women out there. A rather heartwarming anecdote is that Ando always credited his wife, Masako, who encouraged him throughout his journey, offering both emotional and practical help. During the early experiments with creating chicken ramen, Ando would stay up late into the night testing different methods of noodle preparation. His wife didn't just stand by watching. She actively helped him. She'd assist with the cooking process, help with testing the recipes. She probably had a good bunch of like mushy noodles to try and offered feedback on flavor. She was there every step of the process, even though she didn't fully understand the intricacies of food science.
And this guy, Ando-san, worked in his shed behind his house.
Yeah, just imagine that for a second. A shed, not a clean high-tech lab we might picture today. He must have failed hundreds of times, but Ando wasn't gonna give up. He kept at it day after day until he got it just right.
So like all successful founders, one of their key traits is grit and
perseverance.
Yeah. That's right. That's what we tell the kids, don't we? So that's the story of how instant noodles got created. But Ando had more innovation in him. And his second innovation was creating cup noodles. Fast forward to 1971, Ando gave us these iconic cup noodles, a revolutionary take on his original creation. You know how he figured this out?
I have no idea.
He was inspired by watching Americans eating noodles out of cups with forks. That's right, guys. Cup noodles were actually inspired by American ingenuity.
I can just imagine Ando seeing this and thinking, hey, why not put noodles in a cup and call it a meal? I mean, who knew a humble cup could hold the future of snack time around the globe?
Absolutely. And that's the story of how the humble noodle became instant noodles and how cup noodles were created. Let's do the financial deep dive to see if Nissin is a sizable company in its market segment. So the company's name is Nissin Food Holdings, and it's listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange under the ticker code 2897. In Japan, listed companies are listed with a ticker symbol, which is a number. Its market cap today is approximately 6 billion, and its revenues have been growing pretty steadily from about 4.3 billion US dollars in 2020 to $5.5 billion in 2024. The growth rates have some volatility over the last 10 years, but on average, the 10-year compounded annual growth rate
is approximately 5%. It's a pretty good margin business, as you can imagine in the food business. So gross margins are consistently around 37%, and operating margins are consistently around 7%. Japan still accounts for most of its revenues, which is about 60%. And of the remaining 40% outside Japan, North America is a big significant contributor. Beyond Nissin Cup Noodles, they have expanded their brand offering, and they offer other well-known noodle brands called Top Ramen, Dime Icho, UFO, which is a pretty cool name. It specializes in yakisoba, which is the Japanese fried noodles, and then a premium line called Ryo. And they've also been innovating recently to offer higher priced products which are healthier options in its space. So just to give you a sense of context, is a $6 billion market cap noodle company sizable in its space? Here, let's find out. So Ajinomoto, which is a Japanese food and seasonings business, its market cap is approximately $10 billion. Give you a sense of global comps as well. In the global packaged food business, let's take Nestle, which is probably the world's largest diversified food company. It's valued at approximately $300 billion. But for a more specialized food company, for example, say Campbell's Soups, which is soups and snacks, their market cap is about $13 billion. So for a niche food company that produces single or small lines of products, Nissin Foods at a $6 billion market cap is a sizable player. In terms of physical size of operation, Nissin is also large, like most food companies. It employs a lot of people. So Nissin employs about 17,000 employees globally, which is great for countries where they have their factories offering jobs to locals as well. So what's the takeaway here? Well, for me, there are kind of 5 probably interesting bullet points on Nissin's financials. It's a pretty good company in terms of growth. 10-year CAGR 5%, 37% gross margins, 7% operating margins. Its high growth market is definitely North America, which is now starting to contribute significantly to the business. There is innovation in the business, so they've been creating more premium products at a higher price point that are also healthier, reflecting the trends of modern consumption. As a result, they saw an almost 10% revenue growth in 2023 to 2024. But for me, the most important bullet point is resilience of this business. Like most food companies, it is resilient during economic downturns. So whether it be the COVID pandemic or global recessions, instant noodles will still be eaten all around the world, especially because it's got a pretty low price point. So the financial conclusion for me is that it's a pretty steady Eddie food business that's got growth potential in the North American market, but most importantly, it's a defensible business. It is resilient during economic downturns. So for every noodle brand that we've chosen to unravel for you listeners, we've also included a segment that describes to us probably its most interesting and iconic features. And for Nissin Foods, it's how cup noodles journeyed to space.
You heard that right. Andrew was obsessed with space and revolutionized space food as you know it today.
You know, in the 60s and 70s, space was the it thing. Everyone was obsessed with astronauts, rockets, the moon landing. You know, pretty much like today, actually, how Elon Musk has revived the human desire to go to space.
I wonder whether he also indulges his passengers in some instant noodles.
That's right, probably. So as space exploration was heating up, he realized that this was his big chance to revolutionize food. A food scientist, Dr. Dave Munch,
They should have called him Munch.
Munch would be a better word, right?
Yeah.
An actual space food expert happened to be visiting Japan in 1973. He saw how practical cup noodles could be. Hot water, instant ramen, no mess.
It wasn't as easy as just packing them up in a box and sending them off. The real challenge was zero gravity. You've got hot water floating around, noodles trying to escape the cup, And no one wants noodle soup floating around in a tiny spacecraft, just imagine. So NASA had to design special cups with lids that astronauts could tightly secure. It was like cup noodles, but space age.
Yeah, right. The nightmare of every astronaut must be like this single noodle drifting into its like helmet or something, right? So for sure, Ando-san had to design the cup noodles that were sealed properly, and they worked with NASA to perfect the cup design. And don't forget the water dispenser. That had to be just as space efficient as the noodles.
Yeah, because you can't just actually fill a kettle in space. No, you need an actual space-approved water dispenser. It's like, here's your hot water, astronauts. Please don't burn your face off.
And the noodles had to be the right texture too. It couldn't be too soft or too chewy. Imagine biting into a noodle in zero gravity and getting it stuck in your teeth. No thanks. And let's not forget the flavor too. Space food is known for being mega bland. NASA had to make sure the noodles were flavorful enough to overcome that, and Ando's team nailed it. It was the first space food that tasted something you'd actually want to eat. But do you know which mission was the first to officially take cup noodles into space?
It was the 1973 Skylab space station, right?
That's right.
I've done my research.
Yeah, that's right.
Not that I know that on top of my head. So the first time NASA sent instant ramen into orbit was during Skylab 4, the third and final crewed mission to the station. They took cup noodles up there, and the astronauts were really excited about it.
Yeah, Skylab 4 had astronauts Gerald Carr, Edward Gibson, and William Pogue aboard, and they were the lucky ones to try out cup noodles in space for the first time. According to the stories, the astronauts loved it. They even sent feedback to NASA saying that the noodles were a nice change from the usual space food. And it didn't stop there. After Skylab, cup noodles became a regular on NASA missions. It was taken aboard the space shuttle for several missions, and there are reports it was the favorite food for astronauts for decades. Essentially, Ando-san's cup noodles became the unofficial comfort food for space travel. So thanks to Ando-san's genius, astronauts now have the joy of eating ramen while they're out there exploring the universe.
So we know that cup noodles made its debut on NASA's Skylab 4 mission in 1973. What about Japan's space program? Did they get into the ramen action too?
Absolutely. Japan wasn't going to let the US have all the noodle fun. By the time the 1990s rolled around, Japan's own space agency, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA for short, was sending astronauts into space, and you bet they took their ramen with them.
Of course. I can just see it now. JAXA astronauts floating around in space, proudly holding up the Japanese instant ramen cup like, yep, this is the future of space food, folks.
They weren't going to let the Americans one-up them on their, their own noodles, right?
For sure.
And of course, JAXA didn't just settle for regular cup noodles either. They wanted something special for their own astronauts. So they wanted to give the astronauts the home away from home vibe. And they called it Space Ram.
Space Ram.
What a weird name.
That sounds like the name of a superhero.
That's right.
Space Ram, defender of intergalactical noodle lovers.
That's a good one. I wish it were a superhero. Space Ram was actually a specially modified version of cup noodles developed by Nissin in collaboration with JAXA. Like most things Japanese, they have to perfect it, right? So they made sure the flavor was on point, so there was no difference between enjoying ramen in space or ramen back on Earth.
That's right. And even plain food.
So Space Ram did more than just satisfy the taste buds. It became a symbol of progress. Here's the thing, Sabrina. NASA and JAXA knew that food wasn't just about sustenance. It was also about morale. Astronauts were away from Earth for long periods of time, so giving them comfort food was a small but important part of their emotional well-being.
Yeah, when you're in space, you don't just need to fuel your body. You need a little bit of enjoyment too. And who knew that joy would come in the form of a cup of noodles? floating in zero gravity.
That's right. Who knew indeed? It turns out that one of the most iconic snacks on Earth could also be the ultimate space food. Who would have thought?
Yeah, from humble beginnings in Ando's kitchen in the backyard to floating around in space. Cup noodles truly went from Earth to infinity and beyond.
Just like Toy Story. So next time you crack open a cup of noodles, just remember you're holding a piece of space history.
For our second instant noodle brand, we chose Indomie. That's probably gotta be my favorite. It's spelled Indo because it comes from Indonesia, and me spelled M-I-E. So noodle in Indonesian. So my husband Andrew first introduced me to Indomie during our honeymoon in Bali. Right after our wedding on the amazing Uluwatu cliffs, we went to Ubud, which is the artistic capital of Bali, to kick off our 3-month honeymoon.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was
I hope you do.
Awesome.
During this time, Andrew took me to savor the local foods of Bali, including one of mee goreng, which is basically using the Indomie instant noodle.
Yeah, I showed Sabrina how the base noodle, which was really an instant noodle called Indomie, was made. Super easy. So we bought a bunch from the local supermarket, went back to our hotel, the beautiful Chetty in Tanah Gajah. We boiled the water, put the noodles in a bowl, poured the hot water over it, waited 2 minutes, not too long because we wanted to be a bit al dente, so like a little bit chewy and firm, not soggy. Then you tear open the packets all that come inside. There are 5 items: sweet soy sauce, garlic oil, chili paste, crispy onions, and of course, Indomie seasoning. Throw away the hot water, so all you're left are with the dry noodles, and mix it all together. And what do you get, Sabrina?
It's the sweet, salty, umami flavored noodle with a hint of chili, depending on how much chili you want to add. So with this base, you can add anything. We like to bulk it up and make it somewhat healthy, add some protein with a sunny side up egg, or fresh scallions, or even lux it up with a strip of Wagyu beef, organic satay chicken, or even, I often do, Mediterranean herb crusted salmon. I make it in my air fryer. It's awesome and super addictive.
Yeah, I know. In fact, I was so super surprised how much you liked it. Like, I like it because, a lot of the Southeast Asian flavor comes out in the noodle. But I was like, wow, she really likes it.
No, it's a great hangover food as well, even after clubbing. And it's super fast to make as well, before I hit the sack. Then
I think it's also not as messy as the soup noodles that typically are instant noodles.
Yes.
It's because it's dry.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, because I remember there were nights when we came back from clubbing and you cracked open your Indomie, fried an egg. I was like, wow, she's really, besides liking durians, which by the way is another crazy episode we could tell you about this interesting fruit in Southeast Asia. Sabrina loves this Indomie as well. I was like, okay, she's really taken to Asia for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even our kids love it, especially Jules, our 11-year-old. If he had his way, he'd eat it every day. I actually make it as a hearty breakfast for them 3 times a week before they go to school. Asian breakfast, and on the other days, they have European breakfast, yogurt, muesli, breads, etc. And I realized the noodle itself doesn't provide much nutrition. It's just flour, right? So I actually cut the size down. So I divide 1 pack of instant noodles between our 3 boys so they don't get filled up with empty carbs. But then I add healthy stuff with the noodles, like peas and chicken schnitzel. And it's surprisingly fast to make. Peas are microwaved from frozen, chicken schnitzel goes from freezer into air fryer, and Indomie is only 2 to 3 minutes to make. So in 5 minutes or so, they have a breakfast of champions, Asian style, ready for the 3 kids.
But let's talk about the origins of Indomie. It's a truly fascinating story that goes way beyond just noodles. It's about entrepreneurship, political maneuvering, and adapting to a changing world.
Exactly. So to understand Indomie, we have to go back to the 1960s and meet Sudono Salim, the man behind it all. He was born in Fujian, China in 1916 as Liam Siu Leong. He came from a poor rice farming family, and so his childhood was anything but easy. The conditions were harsh, opportunities were scarce, but that didn't stop him from dreaming bigger. So he immigrated to Indonesia as a young man, hoping for a better future, and that's when he took on his Indonesian name, Sudono Salim.
Absolutely. At just 22, Liam left his home in China and set out for Java, Indonesia, looking for better prospects. But the road to success was far from smooth. In fact, his first job in Indonesia wasn't glamorous at all. He worked in the kerupuk factory, those little Indonesian crackers that we all love.
That's right. So not exactly the high-flying world of billion-dollar businesses just yet. Like many Chinese immigrants in Southeast Asia, he started small. First in the kerupuk factory, then in the peanut oil trade, expanding into other things like textiles and flour milling.
And here's where things start to get interesting. So Liam quickly realized that the real opportunity was in food manufacturing. So after working some time in the factory, he decided to strike out on his own. And his first entrepreneurial venture, selling noodles.
But it wasn't an easy path. Indonesia was undergoing major political and economic instability at that time. The country was in the midst of the Japanese occupation during World War II, followed by the Indonesian Revolution for Independence in the 1940s.
It was a tumultuous time, but Liam's ability to adapt was key to his survival and eventual success. After Indonesia gained independence from Dutch colonial rule in 1949, the country faced major economic and social upheaval. The government was nationalizing industries, and being an ethnic Chinese businessman wasn't exactly easy.
Yeah, that's right. After Indonesia gained independence, the country was far from stable. There was a lack of basic infrastructure, constant political struggles, and certainly very little capital for new businesses. So Liam had to learn how to navigate these challenges, dealing with not just market forces, but also government policies, especially since the anti Chinese sentiment in Indonesia wasn't new. Throughout the 20th century, the ethnic Chinese community faced repeated discrimination and violence in Indonesia. For example, in 1965, following the attempted coup that led to Suharto's rise to power, thousands of Chinese Indonesians were targeted and accused of communist sympathies and had their businesses seized.
Yeah.
It's a pretty tough time.
Yeah, absolutely. And this pushed Salim even closer to the Suharto regime. Salim, through his connections, managed to survive and even thrive. But the environment remained hostile. Through his political ties, he secured key contracts, including control over Indonesia's flour milling industry, which would later become the backbone of Indomie.
It was in the early 1960s that Salim saw a major opportunity: instant noodles. At that time, there were already a few noodle producers in Indonesia, but none with the kind of mass appeal or efficiency that Salim envisioned. But choosing to invest in instant noodles was a pretty risky move at that time. It wasn't a booming industry like it is today. It was a niche product, and the technology to produce them at scale wasn't really available in Indonesia at that time. However, like all founders, he was a visionary. He recognized the potential for instant noodles to become a staple food in Indonesia, especially given their convenience and long shelf life. However, making them affordable and suitable for local tastes required innovation in production techniques and ingredient sourcing.
So initially, Salim partnered with the Indonesian entrepreneur and food technologist Teja Wijaya. Their collaboration was crucial in making instant noodles affordable and mass producible in Indonesia. Teja Wijaya helped develop a cost-effective manufacturing process that ensured high quality while keeping prices low. This involved optimizing wheat flour sourcing, refining the noodle making process, and improving seasoning formulations to appeal to the Indonesian palates.
So through their efforts, Indomie was first launched in 1972 under Indofood's predecessor PT Sanmaru Food Manufacturing. The brand quickly gained popularity due to its affordability, great taste, and easy preparation. By the 1980s, Indofood fully acquired PT Sanmaru, bringing Indomie under its control, expanding its reach both domestically and internationally. But there was one big problem. Indonesians weren't really eating instant noodles yet. Not really a lot of it anyways.
Exactly. I mean, rice was king. And noodles, not so much.
So how do you convince a nation of rice lovers to slurp up instant noodles? What was the big breakthrough? So let's get into the most important breakthrough that helped Indofood and its iconic brand Indomie become the global giant it is today. Something that really set it apart from the competition.
That's right. I mean, we're talking about dry noodles, not your typical noodle soup. When Selim first entered the noodle business, the market was still dominated by wet noodle products. People were used to boiling fresh noodles in broth. The decision to make Indomie a dry noodle product was a game changer. So, what inspired Selim to make the shift?
So that's a super interesting story. Indomie's conversion to dry noodles was directly inspired by Indonesia's beloved street food culture, particularly mie goreng, which interpreted as fried noodles, a staple dish sold by street vendors across the country. And so Indofood introduced Indomie as a dry noodle in 1983. Unlike traditional instant noodles, which were soup-based, Indofood saw the opportunity to capture authentic flavors of their street-style stir-fried noodles in this convenient, ready-to-eat instant noodle format. So they incorporated sweet soy sauce, or in Indonesian, kicap manis. Manis means sweet, kicap is ketchup, fried shallots, a blend of spices, and they managed to successfully replicate the rich, savory, slightly sweet taste that the Indonesians adored. This innovation resonated deeply with consumers, allowing them to enjoy the flavors of their favorite warong style or street vendor noodles without the need for additional cooking.
I agree. From a taste point of view, Indomie's distinct flavor profile was shaped by a deliberate focus on sweetness and caramelization, setting it apart from other instant noodles like Nissin, which use salty soy sauce in their soup-based noodles. This choice not only captured the essence of mie goreng, but also catered to local preferences for a balance of sweetness, umami, and depth in their meals.
So that's right. I think the Americans' taste of instant noodles was initially coming from Japan, right? Through Nissin Foods, which really had its heritage in Chinese soup noodles.
Yes, it's obviously very savory, very salty.
Salty and savory was the taste, right? And I think only in the last 20, 25 years, we've seen America and probably a lot of the other Western parts of the world starting to appreciate the flavors that are coming out of Southeast Asia, which are very different, I think, whether it be Indonesia or Thailand or Malaysia and Vietnam or Singapore, right? And you see those flavors coming through all kinds of food products, as well as obviously restaurants and F&B outlets.
Yeah, that's
US, right. So in my mind, Indomie's flavor innovation was really the perfect blend of Chinese and Indonesian culinary traditions, blending techniques like Chinese stir frying with Indonesian local spices and seasonings. This fusion created a unique flavor profile that resonated with consumers, offering the familiar, comforting taste of Chinese style noodles while embracing, a slightly sweet, slightly spicy, aromatic complexities of Indonesian cooking, ultimately making Indomie a cross-cultural culinary phenomenon.
Little did Salim know, this local success of Indomie mie goreng would eventually become a global hit, influencing countless brands worldwide. Today, Indomie was the first major dry instant noodle that has found loyal fans across over many, many countries around the world.
Yeah, and you knew they were so successful because Nissin Foods quickly came up with its own dry style noodle called Deme Icho. But it never really took off outside Japan and a few other countries like Taiwan and Hong Kong. As a result of this innovation, Indomie has overtaken Nissin to become the largest instant noodle company in the whole world.
It was only in 2012 that the dry noodles entered its second era of innovation, with the addition of spice. But let's keep the surprise for later in the podcast.
That's right. That's an interesting one. So you want to definitely hang around for our third instant noodle company. So besides creating a hit flavor, Salim also made a lot of very smart business decisions relating to distribution, production, and marketing. Remember, Indonesia is a large country. It's an archipelago of 17,000 islands with a population of 285 million people, making it the fourth most populous country in the world after India, China, and the US. And what did Salim do? He actually built a nationwide supply chain that allowed Indofood to deliver Indomie to every city, every village, no matter how remote it was. So it wasn't just about urban centers, it was about reaching people in even the more far-flung places and the smallest islands of Indonesia. But how did he do that?
Super smart. So he built a network of factories, distribution hubs, and trucks that could reach places no one else could.
Yeah, absolutely right. So the smart move was he didn't just rely on one large factory. Salim actually set up multiple production factories all around Indonesia, minimizing the transportation costs and allowing him to distribute Indomie much more efficiently.
And this network of factories across the country was key to Indomie's success. And it wasn't just about getting the product to people. Salim understood the importance of market penetration, making sure that Indomie was available in every type of store, from mom to pop shops to large supermarkets, was crucial.
And like every successful company, of course, there was a bit of luck here as well. The timing really couldn't have been better because Indonesia was undergoing rapid urbanization as people moved to cities and the demand for affordable, convenient food skyrocketed. Indomie filled this gap perfectly.
Yes, exactly. And you know the best part? Salim focused not just on large cities, but on the rural population, which was crucial. Indomie became a staple food for families, particularly those with lower incomes who needed an affordable meal that was easy to prepare.
Yeah, I mean, you really see it everywhere in Indonesia, wherever we travel, whether it's Bali or some of the more rural areas as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Salim was really able, with this distribution network, to tap into a huge underserved market.
And this is where you see the power of Salim's vision. He didn't just see Indomie as a product, he saw it as a cultural staple, something that would become part of everyday life for Indonesians, no matter their background or location.
And the final breakthrough that set Indofood apart from its competitors was its massive investment in marketing.
Yes, Salim knew that in order to dominate the market, the brand had to be recognized everywhere, not just in stores, but in the hearts and minds of Indonesian consumers. That's where the magic really started to happen. The brand's marketing campaign was incredibly effective. He used television, billboards, and word of mouth to make Indomie a household name. Suddenly, every Indonesian knew and loved the taste of Indomie.
So once he was successful in Indonesia's domestic market, by the mid 80s, he was already thinking about how to export Indomie around the world. But it was his local penetration that really laid the foundation of Indomie's global expansion. Today, Indonesia still accounts for 80% of Indofood's revenues. So it's a lot, right? I mean, very, very different from Aldi, the German supermarket, from our last podcast, where they expanded outside Germany around the world. But Germany now only accounts for 30% of Aldi's global revenues, right? But for Indomie, Indonesia still remains the heart of its financial success.
So to recap, the big breakthroughs for Indomie's success were the first, dry noodle format, which made the product more convenient, more affordable, and the innovative distribution network that brought Indomie to every part of Indonesia, even the most remote areas. Number two, and that combined with the strategic marketing and keen understanding of local tastes, was a formula that made Indomie the iconic brand it is today.
Yeah, that's right. The combination of smart product innovation and unmatched distribution strategy and marketing really set Indomie apart. It's a testament to Salim's vision and ability to adapt to the local market and its conditions.
Let's spend a bit of time understanding the financials of Indofood. So the company is called PT Indofood Sukses Makmur Tbk. It is the leading Indonesian food company, but it's got a diverse range of businesses beyond just instant noodles. So Bogasari is its flour milling business. It's got an agri business called Indofood Agri Resources, and it's got a separate distribution business as well called PT Indomarko Adi Prima. It is structured under one parent company, which is called the First Pacific Company Limited, which is listed actually in Hong Kong, but controlled by Anthony Salim, the CEO of Indofood. The Salim Group is really Indonesia's largest conglomerate, and Indofoods is its flagship food company. Indofood itself is publicly listed on the Indonesian Stock Exchange. Its ticker symbol is INDF. Now, how much money does this company actually make? So its revenues has been growing steadily, actually, from 5.5 billion US dollars in 2020 to just over $7 billion in 2024. So about $1.5 billion more than Nissin Foods. It is now the largest instant noodle company in the world. It is also a large company physically in terms of its operation. Nissin Food employs 17,000 people. Indofood employs 91,000 people. That's a huge difference.
This is the perfect segue to the one cool phenomena that Indomie created. Its global expansion, but in particular the wonderful story of how Nigerians have fallen in love with it so much that it has become an intrinsic part of their local cuisine. Nigerians even sing about it in their top hit songs for millennials.
Picture this. It's the late 1980s. Nigeria's economy is struggling. Food prices are high and traditional fast meals are limited. Enter a group of bold Singaporean businessmen with an idea. Bring instant noodles, something Nigerians had never seen before, to the local market. Sounds crazy, right?
But also genius.
Yeah, kind of. What was the company behind this move? It's called the Tolaram Group. They were a family-run outfit from Singapore, founded in 1948 by an Indian-Singaporean entrepreneur named Mohan Vaswani. Originally in textiles, Tolaram pivoted into consumer goods, and their decision to enter Nigeria changed everything for them.
Yes, and let's be clear, Indomie wasn't some global sensation back then. Instant noodles were popular in Asia, sure, but West Africa? Not at all. Nigerians had zero noodle culture. They ate rice, yams, stews, and bread. No one thought noodles would ever take off.
A bit like Indonesia in the beginning, right? They ate rice,
Yeah,
but not instant noodles until Salim changed it into this dry noodle format. So I wonder what the story is here, how Nigerians grew to love noodles, having not really eaten it at all.
yeah, it's
right?
all about smart marketing.
That's right. So why Nigeria? Well, Tolaram had been trading in West Africa for years, and then they saw this opportunity. Nigeria had a large youth population, and Indomie came at the right time when affordability was key. So unlike rice or yam, which required way longer times to cook and extra ingredients, Indomie was cheap and fast.
And filling.
And filling, that's
Yeah.
true.
But Nigerians didn't love it right away. At first, people were skeptical. What is this strange, wiggly food? They thought. It wasn't rice, it wasn't fufu, and it didn't fit into the traditional Nigerian cuisine.
I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? An African country has adopted it to become like such a core part of its cuisine, like such a different culture.
Yeah, for sure. So Tolaram had to go all in on marketing. They launched massive campaigns giving away free samples, educating consumers, and positioned Indomie as the ultimate convenience food. They targeted schools, university students, and busy professionals. And slowly but surely, Nigerians started warming up to it.
So just like Indomie's source of inspiration from the street food vendors of Indonesia, the revolution in Nigeria also came from the street food vendors. It's amazing how street food culture has become such an interesting part of cuisine pretty much around the world. Because if you think of where you and I have traveled, and we've traveled to a lot of countries, we always try to eat local and savor the local vendors
to get a local experience,
nothing
right?
better than an authentic street food experience.
That's right. And you think of now the countless YouTube videos where influencers are tasting all kinds of interesting, maybe even weird foods wherever they're traveling. It's kind of pretty cool. Like if you think about it, when we were in Shanghai, I tried fried scorpions, which didn't really taste that good. It's kind of just like crispy, but kind of weird.
River, what is it? Crabs?
River
crabs
shrimps.
And,
Yeah.
shrimp
They tasted good
spicy.
actually.
Yeah.
Xiaolong sha, they tasted really good.
Yeah, I love those.
Yeah.
People always told me how unhealthy those were, but regardless, they're good.
What about the trip where I took you to Malaysia and you enjoyed this particular
the night market?
king of fruits?
Yeah, the durian, yes.
You remember how Anthony Bourdain brought street food to the world through his food TV show? Like you said, oftentimes the most innovative trends come from the streets.
Very true. But back to Nigeria. They did not eat Indomie the way it was originally intended. Instead of just boiling it with a seasoning packet, they started customizing it to fit their local tastes.
There you go. Customization's the key.
So street food vendors began frying Indomie with eggs, peppers, and onions, turning it into a full meal.
Home cooks experimented with jollof-style Indomie, adding tomatoes, suya, plantains, even crayfish.
And even restaurants and fast food joints created Indomie specials, making it a legitimate dish on menus. Soon, Indomie joints became late-night hotspots for students and workers looking for a quick hot meal. This creativity turned Indomie from just an instant noodle brand into a cultural experience.
By the early 2000s, Indomie had become the go-to meal for millennials in Nigeria. Students relied on it in university hostels, young professionals made it for late-night meals, even parents fed it to kids as a quick fix.
And here's what's really interesting. Indomie was so popular, it found its way into Nigerian pop culture.
Wow, that's the first time I've heard of food, entering pop culture.
Yeah, so Nigerian musicians, comedians, and influencers referenced Indomie in their work. The phrase Indomie generation became popular, referring to young Nigerians who grew up on the brand.
How crazy is that? It even inspired music and pop culture. Nigerian artists have name-dropped Indomie in hit songs, like the song Indomie by CDQ featuring Olamide and Mastercraft, where they rap about eating Indomie as part of everyday life. Music is such an intrinsic part of Nigerian culture, and this shows how Indomie has become also a part of Nigerian culture. Here's a quick list of some of the top Nigerian songs for millennials that mention Indomie. Indomie Generation by Small Doctor, Gaga Crazy by Chadi D, and Story for the Gods by Olamide.
And let's not forget Nollywood, the Nigerian movie industry. Indomie pops up in countless Nigerian movies and TV dramas. Whether it's a struggling student cooking a late-night meal, or a comedic scene of someone slurping noodles too fast and probably choking on it. Indomie has pretty much become slang in Nigerian pop culture. When politicians propose tiny, insufficient budgets, people call it an Indomie budget. It's that ingrained into the national conversation.
Fast forward to today, Nigeria is Indomie's second largest market. The country consumes over 1.8 billion packs of Indomie every year. It dominates the instant noodle market with over 70% market share. Indomie Nigeria generates over $1 billion in revenue annually and continues to grow by double digits year on year. Wow, what a success. The fact that an Indonesian instant noodle brand could go from zero to what is basically like a national obsession in Nigeria really is mind-blowing. And it's a masterclass in cultural adaptation, marketing, and business strategy.
Besides making money, this is a case study on how businesses can structure a win-win outcome for both producer and consumer, especially the countries they export to. Indomie and Toleram created a joint venture called Dufil Primer Foods and built its first Indomie factory in Nigeria in 1995, marking a major turning point for the brand.
Wow, that's not that long ago, actually.
Yeah.
You think about it, that's only like 30 years ago.
So Indomie has created thousands of jobs, localized supply chains, and had a major GDP impact in Nigeria. He built partnerships with local farmers to source wheat, palm oil, and seasoning, ensuring a fully integrated supply chain. This meant that instead of relying on imports, Nigeria could produce Indomie domestically, boosting the economy and reducing dependence on foreign goods.
What a great success story for all stakeholders.
So the lesson of the day, never underestimate the power of a good noodle.
And
It's a really smart business moves.
So we've unraveled Indomie, the instant noodle icon that's now the world's largest instant noodle producer. But if Indomie represents a company's classic rise to power through innovation, the next noodle we're talking about shows you the raw power of our technology, the power of social media.
We're talking about buldak bokyeom. I'm not sure whether I'm saying that right.
Close enough.
Yeah. AKA the fire noodles.
That's better. It's definitely fire noodles.
Well, what's wild is how they went from just another Korean instant noodle to a full-blown global phenomenon.
And it wasn't just about the taste, by the way. So let's be real, that nuclear level spice definitely played a role, but Buldak's rise was the perfect storm of old world food industry and new world tech.
Yeah. Traditional food companies used to rely on ads, grocery store placements, maybe even some celebrity endorsement. But Buldak, it exploded on YouTube, the marketing playground for millennials. The Fire Noodle Challenge turned this humble packet of ramen into internet gold.
So in our final segment, we're diving into how a fiery Korean instant noodle went from local curiosity to YouTube legend, sparking challenges, memes, and a cult following worldwide. From a dollar perspective, it turned a simple bowl of spicy noodles into a billion-dollar empire. Unbelievable. So let's step back in time again to 2012, when the Korean food company Samyang Foods created buldak noodles. It's not that long ago, actually, 2012. Wow, okay. Buldak bokyeom, like you say, Sabrina, translates actually to fire chicken stir-fried noodles in English.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, bul is fire, dak is chicken, that's your buldak, bokyeom is stir-fried, and myeon is noodles.
When duck turns into chicken.
That's right. The flavor actually originates from the Korean dish of spicy grilled chicken slathered in a sauce made with gochugaru, which is Korean chili, gochujang, which is the fermented chili paste, soy sauce, garlic, and sugar. It's got that perfect mix of heat and sweetness.
Yes, so buldak, the spicy grilled chicken, not the noodle, became popular in South Korea during the early 2000s. A time when Koreans were obsessed with spicy food challenges. Restaurants serving extra spicy dishes saw long lines, and spicy ramen varieties were doing really well. So in 2012, Samyang Foods decided to take buldak and turn it into an instant noodle. Koreans love spice, but this was a whole new level.
Yeah, the heat level is measured at around 4,400 Scoville heat units, so SHU, which is much hotter than the jalapeno that you Americans are used to, which is only 2,500 SHUs, or Tabasco, which is around the same, SHUs. So much, much spicier.
But here's the thing, when it first launched in April 2012, it wasn't an instant hit.
Yeah, sales were steady, but not groundbreaking. It wasn't until the internet got involved, and that changed everything. That's because fire noodles didn't just get popular, they became an internet challenge. I'm sure you've all seen these on YouTube, right? When social media gets involved, things explode.
Enter the Fire Noodle Challenge, the internet's best worst idea. It all started in 2014 when a few Korean YouTubers filmed themselves eating fire noodles. Their reaction? Sweating, crying, chugging milk, as you can imagine, and straight up panicking. And people loved it.
Yeah, the videos got millions of views, and soon international YouTubers joined in. By 2016, the Fire Noodle Challenge had gone completely viral.
Big creators like Max Stoney, PewDiePie, and countless mukbang stars all took the challenge, pushing fire noodles to audiences worldwide.
Well, there really is the power of social media marketing these days, right?
For sure.
And the best part, Samyang saw what was happening online, and instead of toning it down, they cranked it up. So in 2017, they released Bulldog 2X Spicy, which hit 10,000 SHU, hotter than a serrano pepper. Basically, they looked at the suffering online and said, not enough, more pain.
I wonder how many people got hospitalized.
And the numbers, crazy. By 2017, over 3 million Fire Noodle Challenge videos have been uploaded to YouTube. Some had tens of millions of views, right?
I mean, that kind of free advertising is priceless. Samyang didn't even have to push the product. The internet did it for them.
There you go. Unbelievable. Like, how lucky was Samyang, right? And the best part, Samyang leaned into it. So instead of making the noodles less spicy to appeal to more people, they did the opposite. And they released new flavors too, like carbonara fire noodles, which sounds kind of weird actually, cheese, mala, and even an ice type meant to be eaten cold.
And let's not forget about the global expansion. Samyang set up a halal certified production line and aggressively pushed fire noodles into Southeast Asia, the US, and Europe.
I mean, it's pretty smart by Samyang Foods, right? I mean, if you had all that virality, you just max it out.
Yes, that's
your
when you
moment,
go to
right?
town and
Yeah,
spread the word.
Good for them. I mean, everything Korean these days seems to be, kind of cool and hip, whether it be K-pop or beauty, absolutely. Squid Game on Netflix, so yeah, Korean fire noodles was also a viral hit. By 2020, fire noodles were selling over 2 billion units a year. In 2024, Samyang's revenue hit 1.2 billion US dollars, with fire noodles accounting for 90% of that. Wow, pretty much all of it. Let's side pocket the numbers for now, and let's spend some time discussing why Koreans obsessed with spicy food in the 2000s, right?
To understand why Korea went through a spicy food boom in the 2000s, we need to take a look at a mix of history, culture, science, and even economics.
That's right. So number one, history and cultural roots. The Koreans' love for heat. Korean had a long-standing love for spicy food, dating back centuries. Kimchi, the national dish, is a prime example. It's basically fermented with gochugaru, Korean red chili powder, which gives it its signature spice. But what's interesting is that chili peppers aren't even native to Korea. They were only introduced in the 16th century, most likely via Japanese invasions. But by the 18th century, it was really deeply embedded in Korean culture. Why did Koreans embrace spiciness so much? There are a few reasons. Fermentation and preservation. Spices like chili help preserve the food, which was crucial before refrigeration. Bold flavors. Korean food, I guess, is all about strong flavors, whether it be garlic, fermented paste, so spice kind of fits right in. Symbol of strength. Spicy food was seen as invigorating, giving you energy and stamina, which ties into traditional beliefs about food and health. Pretty interesting.
Number two, the well-being trend and spice as a health booster. In the early 2000s, South Korea was going through a health-conscious food movement called the well-being trend. People became more interested in functional foods, things that weren't just tasty but also had health benefits. Spicy food fit perfectly into this trend because of its scientifically backed health perks. First, boosts metabolism. Capsicum, the compound in chili peppers, increases metabolism and fat burning. Eating spicy food triggers pain receptors, which release endorphins, the body's natural feel-good chemicals. And it clears sinuses and aids digestion. So, when wellness became a big focus, spicy food wasn't just an indulgence, it was practically a health supplement.
But by the late 1990s, early 2000s, there came a period of economic uncertainty in South Korea. After the 1997 Asian financial crisis, many people were struggling financially, leading to an increase in demand for cheap, comforting, and fast food. So spicy food became a psychological escape. There's even a concept called shinmijugyeok, which means spicy food addiction. So the idea is that when people are stressed, they crave strong, overwhelming flavors as a form of emotional release. That's interesting. One researcher from the Korean university even suggested that spicy food helps redirect physical pain away from emotional stress, which explains why so many stressed out college students and office workers were diving into fire hot spicy rice cakes and bulldog noodles.
Well, certainly way cheaper than going to therapy.
That's right.
And finally, the endorphin rush culture. Pain as pleasure. The 2000s also saw a shift in food culture, where eating extreme spice became a competitive sport. Restaurants started serving fire versions of classic dishes, and people would challenge their friends to eat the spiciest thing on the menu.
So there was tteokbokki, which is spicy rice cakes. Places introduced different levels of spiciness that even required guests to sign waivers.
Restaurants became famous for the volcanic spice level.
And of course, the Korean barbecue pork belly. Spicy marinades became more and more popular, with ghost pepper and Carolina Reaper versions appearing in Korean barbecue joints.
Okay, let's try to pronounce Korean barbecue pork belly. Samgyeopsal.
Should get our Korean friends to teach
I
us how to
know.
pronounce that better. Sorry, guys.
TV shows further fueled the trend, featuring celebrity chefs and comedians suffering through impossibly spicy dishes for entertainment.
There you go. At least they have fun with their food, right? The Koreans. What's more, as Korean pop culture exploded with K-pop, K-dramas, spicy food has become part of the Korean experience for international tourists and fans. So K-dramas frequently feature scenes of characters sweating through spicy meals. K-pop idols participate in spicy food challenges on variety shows. Street food vendors in Seoul have definitely capitalized on trends by selling extreme versions of all the local dishes in much spicier versions. All in all, one can only say that the Koreans definitely love their spice and have a lot of fun with it.
That brings us to our business and financial deep dive. So, what happens when a noodle brand becomes a social media sensation? Money. Lots of it.
Yeah, let's get back to unpacking these numbers. In 2014, fire noodles made up less than 10% of Samyang's total sales. By 2016, just 2 years later, the number jumped to 30%. Fast forward to 2020, and fire noodles account for nearly 50% of Samyang's revenues. Today, I think it's almost 90% of its $1.2 billion worth of revenues, right?
That's some serious growth right there.
Just from bulldog noodles.
Wow. It's like watching a fire spread, but in a good way. And speaking of fire, we should mention that this explosion in sales is mostly thanks to Bulldog. In fact, overseas sales accounted for 68% of their revenue in 2023 alone.
Which makes sense when you think about it, because they're not just selling in Korea anymore. Samyang, because of YouTube, is like all over the world. So of course you'd market it to the US, to Europe, and today, China is its largest market. In fact, in 2024, Samyang saw almost a 40% year-on-year increase in sales overseas.
And here's the kicker. Samyang is pushing hard into markets like Indonesia and Malaysia, with a special focus on halal-certified products. They've got the MUI Halal certification for some of their key flavors like original, cheese, and honey. What a strategy.
Yeah, for sure. You'd market it to everywhere.
Yeah, by tapping into the halal market, they've not only gained a foothold in Southeast Asia, but also strengthening their global appeal. I mean, who doesn't want to add bulldog to their cuisine, right?
Absolutely. I mean, they're coming out with pretty intriguing new flavors too, like the bulldog carbonara dumplings, mixing the heat of bulldog with the creamy, comforting flavor of carbonara. So they're definitely trying to be inventive there, right?
Yeah, and people are loving it. In fact, food influencers have been sharing their own ways of making these noodles even better.
They've really nailed the global expansion game. So if you haven't got bulldog in your market, you know for sure it's coming soon.
Bulldog is a true success story of how a viral challenge can spark a billion-dollar empire. Alright, as we wrap up, let's talk about the future of instant noodles. We've covered how these humble noodles have conquered nations, fueled economies, and even made their way into outer space. But what's next? What's the next big noodle innovation?
Yeah, well, let me tell you something super interesting happening in Bangkok. There's a store called Good Noodle, and it's essentially the world's first self-service instant noodle cafe. Imagine walking into a bright, colorful, fast food style store, but instead of burgers, you get to choose from hundreds of instant noodle varieties, from Korea's spiciest buldak to Japan's creamy miso ramen to Indonesia's legendary Indomie.
And the best part? You can customize it. Add toppings, experiment with flavors, and cook it right there on the spot. It's like a DIY noodle bar meets a global street food experience.
I think actually this concept has huge potential outside Thailand. Think New York, London, Sydney, or Berlin, any city with a massive student population or late night food culture. It could be designed funky and cool with neon lights, manga inspired decor, and a social media friendly vibe. A place where people don't just eat, they experience the noodles.
Yeah, let's talk about business. Margin on instant noodles alone might be tight, but the real money is the condiments, add ons, and let's be honest, the drinks. Picture this a half bar, half noodle cafe. The people come for a bowl of ramen after a few beers, or maybe even a spicy noodle challenge with a cold pint of lager to wash it all down.
Yeah, I love that idea. So think of it as the next evolution of the instant noodle industry, taking it from dorm rooms to cool social spaces. Who knows? Maybe in a few years we'll be seeing good noodle franchises popping up worldwide, or even a chain of noodle bars that blend fast, affordable food with nightlife culture.
Instant noodles have already changed the world once. Maybe it's time for the next big noodle revolution.
Alright, so that's a wrap on today's deep dive into the global noodle empire. If you got a crazy noodle business idea, or if you just love eating as much as we do, let us know. And don't forget, slurp loudly, live boldly, and stay hungry.
Until next time, happy noodling! Please follow us and support us by hitting subscribe below or in your preferred streaming platform. Auf Wiedersehen!
I'll see you soon.